Hey, how's it going? Mr. Deadman of the Deadman's Tome podcast. And this show is the show that's too sexy for YouTube because of this voice that you're hearing now. I know it's some crazy wild time. Very, very crazy. Emotions are high, tension's high. I hope you find this to be a cleanse if you need that. Not that you need to be distracted from what's going on, but just you might need an emotional cleanse. And I hope this episode is that for you. Let me go, you know what? Let me go ahead and start the show off with a shot. I'll do that. Anyway, my guest tonight, Curtis Lawson. How's it going?
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Now, I start off with one question with all my guests. And it's a big question. It's a tough one. You know what it is?
What's that?
Who's your daddy and what does he do?
Who's my daddy?
No, I'm just joking. No.
He was a naval engineer.
Oh, really? I thought you were saying like a ninja or something.
Nah, nothing that cool.
Okay. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, as you said, my name is Curtis M. Lawson. I'm a writer. I live in Salem, Massachusetts. I mainly write weird fiction and supernatural horror. I started off doing comics. I did comics for like about 10 years before I started writing prose. I ran out of money to pay artists, so I wrote a novel, and that seemed to be more successful than any of my comic stuff, so I decided I did that now. And I've been doing that for about 5 years, writing novels, short stories, and recently started publishing poetry in the last year or so.
Okay, that's quite a journey there. So you started off with comics. You did that for about 10 years, right?
Yep.
Okay. 10 years doing
little
comics.
Success.
Now, you're right. Now, when I talk to people who make comics, it's like, that has to be really expensive. Like, art is not cheap, and it's not free.
It's very expensive. One of the problems with comics, too, is unless you're self-publishing all the stuff, and then you're paying for all the art, you're doing these pitches. Companies want to see like 4 to 7 pages of what you want to do. So if they don't pick up that book, then you move on to a new project. But you have, I don't know, $400 worth of artwork sitting on your computer that you can't do anything with. You move on to the next project, you have $400 more worth of artwork. And it got to the point where, I had all these kind of 4 to 7 page pitches and these little anthology pieces that I made no money on and spent a lot of money to produce. And I said, I can't really keep doing this. I have a family to support. Let's try something different.
Okay, that makes sense, though. I mean, because it would be really, really expensive to keep that up.
Yes.
Oh man. I mean, there's different avenues now. I know so much. It's like barely even surface level. But Indiegogo or Kickstarter projects where people try to self-publish comics, but I don't know how effective that is.
I think it can be effective. I know some people who've done very well with it, and that kind of picked up towards the end of the last couple of years of when I was doing comics. And I tried to do one, and I did try to do a Kickstarter. I was doing this web comic called Curse of the Black Terror. And I did 5-page chapters, I guess, and every one was by a different artist. And that was all kind of like for the love of it. It was all artists that I knew, and nobody was getting paid. We were just, doing this thing with this public domain character kind of for fun. And after I went through the first story arc, I decided that if I wanted to keep it going, I was really going to have money to pay people and such. So I did a Kickstarter, and it didn't do very well.
That's bad. That's bad.
Yeah, but
that happens.
Some people have done with it.
Yeah, we tried to do a Kickstarter too for Deadman's Tome comic, and I didn't really do. It just, I don't know. There's good, there's success, and there's, I guess not. It happens. But anyway, you start there, and then you start. You're still writing.
Yes.
Now, has it always been horror?
It's always been horror adjacent, at least, I guess. when I first started writing, I used to play in bands a long time ago, and my last band broke up, and I decided I wanted to do something more solitary. And people had always told me I was a good writer, so I decided I was going to write. And comics were kind of my
So you
first
wrote
love
the lyrics.
before music.
You wrote the lyrics.
I
for
wrote
the band.
lyrics. Yeah, I wrote lyrics, and I wrote kind of like angsty high school poetry and stuff like that. And I'd write these, I don't know, like youthful, like bullshit political diatribes that you do when you're a teenager. And people just thought I had a good way with words. So I said, okay, let me explore this. And comics were my first love, really, before music. The first thing I got really passionate about. So, I decided to go down that road. And I started writing short stories and comics at the same time, but I kind of pursued comics more. And my goal was to work for Marvel. And in retrospect, I don't know what I was thinking, because I just, I'm not that guy, I don't think. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna resurrect like Damian Hellstorm, or I'll do like a Doom comic where Doctor Doom goes and saves his mother from hell, kind of thing. And like all these ideas that just were like on the periphery of the Marvel universe, that I thought I'd just like waltz into Marvel and be like, this is what I'm gonna do, guys. And be like, oh, thank you. And I'm probably not the guy who's meant to write a more lighthearted or Marvel type comic like Spider-Man or something, as much as I love that stuff. So yeah, all my stuff has been kind of at least horror adjacent. In my, I did some early kind of sci-fi stuff, but even I had this webcomic called Divus Morte, which was kind of a space opera thing, but it was also kind of survival horror at the same point. And I did some horror comics, and I did Curse of the Black Terror, which I mentioned, which was a superhero web comic, but that was really dark and really violent, very gritty. So, it's always been dark fiction of some sort.
Okay. So yeah, your tone. You know what you can do. Yeah. I don't know. Don't sell yourself short. If you had like a Spider-Man franchise, I don't know. You'd probably do pretty well. I mean, right now they're just pretty much giving it to anybody, right? I mean, didn't they make Captain America into like a Hydra agent now? I mean, they're just destroying
a
stuff.
couple years back, I guess. Yeah, they did that. I honestly, it's weird. Marvel used to be such a huge part of my life when I was younger, and I haven't picked up a new comic in years. Not like Marvel or DC comic anyway.
They're ruining their stuff, I think. But
yeah,
anyway.
I'm just not into what they're doing. But I do have, I have a friend, Nico Leone. He draws for Marvel, and I'm very supportive of him. And he's done some of the newer. He did some Spider-Man stuff with Bendis before he left, and he's doing cool, Power Pack. So I'm happy for anybody who's doing it, and it's just what they're producing now isn't really for me, I guess.
Right. So why horror? What's the draw towards horror?
I've always been just kind of naturally attracted to it. When I was a kid, I grew up on like the, in the horror section of the VHS, of the video store with all the VHSs and stuff. The first movie I really remember loving, like obsessing over, was Christine, John Carpenter's rendition of Stephen King's Christine.
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street. And then when I got into music, I got into heavy metal and punk rock, and that evolved into death metal and black metal. So I've just always been drawn to a darker aesthetic, I guess.
Nothing wrong with that. Okay. So it wasn't like a deep-seated childhood or a deep-seated, like a problematic childhood or anything like that?
Well, there was that. That's probably stuff I don't consciously think about. I did have a pretty problematic childhood. My parents liked to party a lot, and they didn't always do what they should have been doing. So, and I didn't really get along with people in school, and I didn't make it easier on myself to get along.
I was just throwing that out there as a joke. But, that is the cliche. That is the cliche that if you write hard, you have to be messed up in the head.
Yeah, well, there's probably some truth to it.
I mean, what's your browsing history look like?
It's grim. Right?
I mean, that's real. I mean, like, when I mean, what sort of research do you do when you write your stuff?
Oh man, I love to research, so it really depends on the project. But for Blackheart Boys Choir, which is my latest full-length novel, I did a ton of research, not just on classical music, which is a big part of it, but on kind of the history of composers, and also on kind of youth psychology and what mass shootings and violent youth movements like the Cultural Revolution in China and the Hitler Youth Werewolf divisions and
wait, the Hitler Youth Werewolf divisions? Werewolf divisions? What?
So at the end of the war, they took all these Hitler Youth kids and they said, listen, Russia's going to invade, like they're going to say the war's over. You guys need to keep fighting. And they fought till like 47. The war ended in 45, and they were like 12 to 18-year-old kids, and they were committing political assassinations against Soviet politicians and I guess Germans who collaborated with the Soviets in East Germany. They fought until like 47 or something like that, and they were all these kids. There wasn't like a grown-up amongst them, but somebody within the Reich told these kids to keep fighting, and they did. So
I didn't know anything about that.
Oh yeah, it's pretty wild. And some people say it never existed. Some people say it was just like propaganda and it's a legend. But there's a comic about it. I forget what it's called. It might just be called Werewolf. And I reached out to the guy who wrote it, and he said that he couldn't tell me how, but he knew for a fact that it was real and these people existed. My guess is that, maybe his grandfather or great grandfather or somebody was part of this or saw something.
Could be. I mean, he could be trolling you. How do you know he's not trolling you? I mean, was this on 4chan or 8chan or something? Like, where did you find this guy?
No. This is, he it's a published comic. Like, he wrote this comic. Okay. And I reached out to him about it because I had been researching it. And he was, he swore up and down that it was a legit thing. But like I said, historians kind of argue about whether it was true or not. But so I'll research all sorts of stuff like that, from that and the Cultural Revolution to the Columbine kids. There's actually a really good TED Talk with the mother of one of the Columbine shooters.
Oh, I've not seen that.
Yeah.
I asked that question because that gets authors in a lot of trouble. Hey, what's your browsing history like?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine if the police went onto my computer.
Before we get out into detail about the the research and the influence behind Blackheart Boys Choir, let's talk about the book for a second. So, what is this book? I mean, how would you describe it?
Blackheart Boys Choir is, I guess, depending on how you look at it, it's either supernatural horror or psychological horror or some melding of the two. And it's about a troubled teenager named Lucien Beaumont who, after his father commits suicide, his mother kind of blows all their money. They were wealthy before his father was a kind of famous composer.
Yeah, she's like a drunk or something. She's like,
maybe
a pill popper too.
Yep. So she's just kind of lost in addiction and in grief, and has kind of left her teenage son to his own devices. And he's left his kind of what he calls the academy, which is kind of insinuated that it's like this fancy private school, or maybe it's a school for troubled kids. And he ends up having to finish his senior year at a public high school. And he doesn't make things easy on himself. He doesn't like most of the other kids, and he'll only wear suits. He only listens to classical music.
Right.
He thinks he's better than most people, and he is very intelligent. He's very precocious. He's very talented, but he's not able to. He's not able to handle those things in a mature way, and as I said, he looks down on others, and these people who probably wouldn't have completely accepted him anyways, he makes it very easy for them not to accept him. And he discovers an unfinished piece of music that his father wrote with a collaborator. A lot of it's been blacked out, and the notes have been obscured. And this demonic entity starts speaking to him, promising him that he'll reveal more of this music in exchange for him committing increasingly violent acts. And he becomes obsessed with finishing this song and goes down this kind of spiral of violence. And it's unclear how much of it is real and how much of it is in his head.
See, that's what I really like about this book so far. I'm only about like, I want to say like a third, maybe, a third of the way in. And I like how ambiguous things are. First off, the kid is a little psychopath. Like he's doing things to the other kids, like killing them and stuff. He did something to his mom where I think make her swallow thumbnails or something. I don't know, it was like horrible. But it's like, did it happen? Because there's no real reaction to it. It just, he does it. It talks about it. It lays it there. I mean, the prose is fine. The narrative is fine. But there's just no real reaction. So it's like, is it in his head? And the Academy bit, I didn't even catch that. Because you're right. He keeps referring to the Academy, which I thought was like a preppy school, whatever. But it could just be a place for troubled youth.
Yeah, and that was another thing I wanted to leave ambiguous. Was this just a fancy school, like a prep school, or was it a place for troubled youth, or was it some mixture of both? And yeah, it took a lot of thought, I guess, writing the book to where you said there's no reactions to certain things, to figure out how to, I guess, make that all seem natural and have you guess whether things are real or not. And I kind of use people's reactions or lack thereof to give hints as to what is real and what's in his head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that. Like the boys definitely react to, like the other boys he meets, they react to his performance when I forgot what he was singing.
To Joy.
Yeah, Ode to Joy. And then his therapist reacts to him. Was it the therapist or school counselor? I don't recall.
It's like a school counselor, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, she's acting as a therapist.
Yeah. My experience, they're kind of like, they're bad. And they usually like reference out, But yeah, and the stuff he says to her is hilarious. It's funny. But what I enjoy about this book so far is I do like, and I didn't think this was going to happen. A book that has like this Glee Club sort of element to it. What these boys form a choir, like a singing troupe. Like, what is this? Is this some artsy fart? But no, it's really entertaining. And first off, he's a little psychopath. He's obsessed with this piece of music. He's talking to a demon sort of thing that's in his head. He will kill for it, and he does. Okay, you mentioned research for school shooters. Is there something that happens in this book that goes a little Columbine?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to spoil too much, but it definitely, that was kind of the main, I guess, impetus behind me writing this was.
Ooh, okay.
It was very inspired by all the school shootings and such that are going on, and
damn.
Beyond that, and you've read, obviously you're a third of the way in, and you know that the book starts at the end.
Yeah.
That can give you some sort of clue as to how things progress, even though it's written in kind of a, I guess, colorful way. Yeah, like I said, I don't want to give too much away, but the book does start off at the end and then kind of, goes back. And I guess the school shootings were a big part of what I wanted to explore with it because, it's such a big problem, and I see so many people addressing it either as it's a gun issue and this wouldn't happen if we didn't have guns, or it's a mental health issue and it has nothing to do with it. They'd do it with bombs if they could. And like, to be fair, the Columbine kids actually had like propane bombs that they had set up too. They just failed, and they would have killed way more people than the guns would have. But
and then they made those bombs in their garage, and their parents didn't even know about it.
Yeah. But what I wanted to do here was, there's enough people arguing about the gun debate and the mental health debate and all these things. I wanted to try to examine why these things are happening, because I don't think that any legislation of any type is going to stop this unless we understand why it's such a prolific problem. There has to be something deeper going on. So I tried to address things that, as a youth, as a troubled youth myself, like I said, I was involved in like the black metal scene and stuff when I was a kid, and in the early days of when it first kind of took root in America, and we never did anything violent per se, but we talked about doing violent shit. And we did, we would I don't want to implicate myself here, but we'd vandalize.
Don't worry. There was a guest a while back that full on told me he once wrote about killing high school kids when he was in high school. Yeah. But I get what you mean. I mean, like, were you one of those kids that had like a journal or something, like you wrote some kind of fucked up shit? If a teacher were to see that, they'd be like, "Oh man, you're fucked in the head."
Yeah, and like actually, I was big into like occultism and stuff when I was a kid too, so I'd be reading all this stuff in school. But as I said, is a kind of a troubled kid who was rudderless. I didn't have any direction. My parents were kind of too absorbed in their own kind of like, party lifestyle to give me any real direction. So I was looking for it anywhere I could get it, and I guess it came in the form of like black metal and Nietzsche and occultism and anything I could kind of grasp onto that had this sense of, I guess, faux traditionalism to it, and that's what I grasped onto, which is kind of what Lucian does in the book. He in a different way, but I think that a lot of
he grasps on. Towards like he's obsessed with like classical music, right? Or like, and is he kind of like a nihilist? Like, he seems like he doesn't really care about anything else, or
he only cares about art. That's it, know. And part of the main reason I chose classical music actually was because I didn't want it to be out of date. Like metal right now, metal's already like old guy music. You know what I mean? Like younger people
that's my music.
Don't listen to metal. Yeah, mine too. And punk's dead, metal's dead. Like like there's.
And I love how you described it too. Punk is like liberals that drink Pabst and I think Democrats are gonna save them or some shit.
Yeah, like they think drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon and voting Democrat is like a fuck you to the system or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just figured if I made it about a real subculture, it would feel dated and like almost immediately. So I tried to make.
That's why.
Yeah, I wanted to make kind of a classical music subculture because it's timeless. So that was the main reason, and I do like classical music. I have an interest.
I was going to ask. I don't know. I was like, maybe he's kind of a classical music snob. Maybe he is.
I wouldn't call myself as a classical music snob, but I do enjoy it a lot. And probably the most rewarding part of writing this book was all the classical music I got exposed to that I had never been exposed to before.
Everyone knows the main names like Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin,
and then I just try to stick with mostly things that people would know because I didn't want to get too obscure and make it not fun for people.
That's interesting you say that. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
As you say, I did sneak in some deep cuts like Gesualdo. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, I noticed that. Like some,
obscure composer who was like, I think he was like a murderer and like a sadist.
Yeah. I mean, they composed good music. They weren't probably the best human being, but they were a good artist.
Yeah.
As it tends to be sometimes. Michael Jackson might have actually diddled kids. I don't know, but I still listen to Bad. If it comes on, I'll definitely jam to it. You know?
Man, and I've had this discussion with my own son. I'm like, listen, I believe that Michael Jackson did this horrible stuff, but man, Thriller is just one hell of an album.
Right?
Like,
you can't take that away.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
And there's this quote about Richard Wagner. You know, Richard Wagner's flaws are very well documented, and you know he was a racist, and he stole money from people, and he slept with other men's wives, and you know all this stuff.
Some people see that as a something to compliment these days.
They do.
Oh, you mean he cucked someone? Okay.
But there was a moneylender who he ripped off. You know, and he was a Jewish guy. You know, and Wagner was an anti-Semite, and somebody was interviewing him about, you know, Wagner because he ripped him off, and he was kind of a celebrity at the time. And he said, there are a million men who don't pay their debts and sleep with other men's wives, but only one of them wrote Tristan and Isolde. So sometimes, you know, you have to separate the art from the artist.
You went deep. You went deep into the classical scene.
Yeah, I tried because, you know, Lucien was obsessed with it, and I wanted to. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with metal, particularly black metal. I'm like, it was like my life for years.
Yeah, I only know a few bands.
So
I think I only know one by name, Dimmu Borgir.
Okay.
They're black metal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I jammed out to them today. Go ahead.
On the mainstream end of black metal too, you know?
Yeah.
I was saying they're on like the more mainstream end of black metal too. So like I wanted to capture that sense of like artistic obsession that I had when I was a kid with him, which is why one of the reasons I went so heavily into the classical stuff. But like I said, the main thing I wanted to try to address in the book was why this sort of violence keeps happening. And, you know, essentially, I'm no expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a sociologist. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you have a lot of young people who have no guidance. We live in a society now where everything's subjective. There's no definite answers, and it can be, I guess, confusing and frustrating for a young person who just really wants guidance. And if you're telling them that, you know, well, you know, I say this as an atheist. I say this, you know, as a very like, you know, like a socially liberal person. But like when you're a young person and you're looking for answers, and they're like, well, there's no God and there's no objective right or wrong, and there's no, you know, not even biology is, you know, absolute. Then, you know, where do you go for answers? And I feel that with a certain subsect of society, without that sort of guidance and without someone to point them in the right direction, they're gonna go off the rails.
You're right about that. I mean, that's one thing I liked about this book is that it did have present that philosophy there, the awareness that things are subjective, that outlook, that everything's subjective. So how do you find what's good when everything's subjective? And that's Lucien, you know, he likes the fine arts. He likes classical music. But one could probably say to him, and while you despise like the popular pop, which he did in the book, right? He didn't want anything to do with it. Wasn't even really aware of it and despised it. It's like the stuff you listen to, wasn't that what was pop back in the day? Wasn't that the popular stuff back then? I mean, but see, I'm trying to do a gotcha with Lucien, but even that would still be subjective because be like, so what? Big deal. Like I like it. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, he's supposed to be a, you know, I guess I can't think of the right word. He's supposed to be a contradictory kind of character. You know, he has he's supposed to be wrong a lot of the time, which is kind of the point of him. But he's, as much as he's wrong, he has some, at least I think he has some very spot on insights about certain things, which makes him a more compelling character, because he has no moral compass. He only really values art, and he has a kind of a warped view of the world in a lot of ways, but he has these certain insights that you're like, wow, I can't argue with that. Like, he's absolutely right about this thing. And I think that is part of what makes a compelling villain.
There was a comment about the Holocaust that he mentioned in the book, the character did, Lucien, which in a way he was right, but if you were just take that out of context, it's like, whoa, what did you just say? It's like, but it's like I got what he meant though, that like in the end of it all, like thousands of years from now, like who's gonna know what happened, because we might just all be gone, and it'd be like the stuff we worry about now, 200 years from now, are going to be totally different. It might not even be the same. We might not even be here,
And going back to like the whole idea of like subjectivity and such, I think that Lucien's detachment is able to kind of see that long-term thing a little bit more, like his statements about the Holocaust and like, in 1,000 years, how's this going to be different than any other genocide that happened, kind of thing. If you look at, right now, I think especially in the arts, there's this strong push to judge historical figures from modern day
and
morality.
That becomes, not to adopt the word problematic, but that does become problematic, because it's like they don't live today. They lived back then. If you're judging them with the moral compass of today, whose moral compass anyway? But the morals of today.
And more importantly than us doing that right now, I guess to think about is, in 50 years, we're going to be judged by someone else's moral compass. And I guarantee you it's going to be different. Yep. And there are things that are considered very, very moral, very normal, or, even like, the paragon of virtue right now. We don't know what those things are, but some of these things that we consider the height of virtue are going to be considered monstrous in 50 years, because that's just how the world works. And, I was talking with Ramsey Campbell and on my own podcast, and
nice.
He mentioned that we had a similar discussion about this concept, and he was saying how the generation with the most vitality at the time always thinks that they have the ultimate truth.
Right.
And so I think when we're going back and, judging whoever because of their actions or the morality and the norms of their time, that we just have to be ready to have the same thing happen to us.
Right. And it's funny, because if you bring that up to the people who present that, they don't see it. They don't think it's ever going to happen to them, because they think they are the right. They're in the right. And you know what? And maybe they are. But I think it could be on particular issues. And there's an industry on. I'm not going to go into how there's like an industry for advocating for rights, and eventually, which is fine. Like, everybody should have rights. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like there's a push to make things. There will become a time when, let's say, trans rights, all that stuff, which fine, yeah, they have rights. Make them have rights, sure. I don't have a problem with that. But then what's the next push? What's after that? And then you hear the stuff and the rumblings that sound way off. Like, you see articles coming out from like Vox and other places talking about pedophilia, and people apologizing for it as if it's okay.
They're trying to get themselves rebranded as minor attracted people. They're calling themselves MAPS.
There's a whole fucking podcast scene about that. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you goddamn fucking kidding me? People said, oh, that's a slippery slope. That'll never happen. But when there's money to be made on pushing whatever the next progressive narrative is, you bet your ass if it comes up, they'll push it.
Somebody will, yeah. If there's money to be made, and there's, I don't want to get like too deep.
Yeah, I know. We're getting to the weeds here.
But I guarantee you that if big pharmaceutical companies can push drugs to stave off puberty and to keep people seemingly younger for longer, that they will push for pedophilia to become the norm so that they can sell drugs to do that.
Oh gosh.
And that sounds like a conspiracy theory.
It does. It sounds crazy, but Okay.
So,
all right. So you have a taste of classical music. Do you write to music?
I do. So it depends on the project. For Blackheart Boys Choir, I listen to almost all classical music, and then like some black metal with more symphonic elements, and then a little bit of weird stuff. There's a band called Marching Church, which is a side project of one of the guys from Ice Age that I really like, and that's kind of avant-garde. I listened to a lot of that when I was writing it. But mostly I listened to choral classical music while I was writing Boys Choir. And then I have a Western cosmic horror book that I wrote, and a lot of that I listened to old school country like Hank Williams Sr. and
okay.
Johnny Cash, and
nice.
A lot of psychobilly and stuff too. Nick 13 from Tiger Army put out a solo country album that's all like real old school country. I listened to a lot of that when I was writing it. So it really depends on the project and the mood that I want to get into, the kind of mindset that I want to be in.
Okay. And just to make sure I have this right, you write to the music, right? I mean, do you write while listening to the music, or do you? I mean, that's pretty much the question.
I don't know if I understand the question.
Okay. Well, when I ask this question to different writing groups, it's like, no, I listen to music to maybe get the idea, but I can't listen to the music while I write because I get distracted. But what about for you?
Oh no, I have the music playing the whole time I'm writing. Yeah, I grew up as like a very music centrist kid. I don't know, but I was always listening to music when pretty much my whole life once I kind of discovered anything past the Chipmunks. And like I said, I had kind of a troubled childhood. My parents fought a lot on top of like partying a lot and stuff. So music was always there, drowning everything out, and that's a habit I've never broken. So I have music playing almost constantly.
Okay, so it's playing constantly. And does it interfere with the dialogue scenes? Like when you start writing,
No.
the lyrics come in? Okay.
If it does, if I find it distracting, I just switch to something either that's instrumental or like I said, I listen to a lot of black metal, and the vocals in black metal, it's almost like another instrument. Cause
right. I don't even know what they're saying.
Exactly. And a lot of it, you can't decipher what they're saying. It's almost just like this distorted instrument,
Right.
So I listen to something where the vocals won't distract me if I'm having an issue with that.
Hey, that's cool. Now, and you kind of alluded to this already, but does your prose change based on the music you listen to?
Yes and no. So I think so. But it's hard to tell. When I wrote that first novel, the Devoured, that's the Western cosmic horror one. I was going for a very specific kind of feel, and it was the first big thing I wrote prose wise. So I feel like the music really impacted that, but it's hard to tell because I wrote that 5 years ago, and maybe just my style has changed over that time, and it has less to do with the music. But I think the music impacts it, because
the music does.
I also have these other books called like these from this series, this Bad World series, and they're much more, I guess they're dark, but they're kind of like comedy horror. Well, not even. I mean, they're kind of violent and whimsical. They're like a Tarantino film, kind of. And they have a much looser feel to it. And I listen to very different music when I write those. And And when I wrote Boys Choir, like I said, it was mostly classical, and I was really trying to channel this faux sophistication. So, and the music I was listening to helped me with that feel.
I like how you just faux sophistication. Yeah,
yes.
I like that. That kind of summarizes the whole clique there with Lucien.
Yes.
They're all wearing suits. No, not the trench coat mafia, but the suit. They're Armani mafia. Okay. Now, I want to talk about your other works too, but before we do that, I try to keep these episodes about an hour long. Let me know if you have more time.
I can talk forever.
Okay. All right. So, with this book and other books or other short stories that you have out there, maybe, have you ever had any sort of pushback, or have people like police your content or anything like that?
So for me, that isn't really. I haven't had an issue with it personally so much. A little bit with Boys Choir, but not really with anything else. I have a short story in my collection, Black Pantheons, called Demons of Manzanar. And it's probably the story that's been the most well received from that collection. But I've also had people tell me that I shouldn't have written it because, it's from the point of view of a Japanese American child in an American internment camp during World War II. And it deals with Oni and, like kind of Japanese mythological themes, as well as, the struggles they were going through in the internment camps and such. And I've had people tell me that I shouldn't have written that because I don't have the proper experience. And, essentially, you're a straight white male. You shouldn't write outside of that. I
have a problem with that too. That's goofy.
Yeah,
it's like we're also not serial killers either, but we write about serial killers.
And I was actually on a panel at Barnes and Noble a few years ago, and this kind of came up, and I basically said, no, I've never been a young Japanese boy, and I've never been in an internment camp, but I'm a human being, and I've been a child, and I've been scared, and I've been angry, and these are universal human emotions, and a huge part of being a writer is being able to put yourself in others' shoes and being able to empathize.
Right.
And I think that if you treat something with the proper respect and you do your research, and there's nothing should be off limits as long as you're approaching it respectfully. And then with Boys Choir, I kind of knew I was going to have problems because Lucien's just, he's not, he just doesn't give a fuck about anything.
No, he doesn't.
And I do take a lot of shots. It's more, I don't want to say political, but it addresses more kind of sociological concerns and cultural concerns than most of my other work. And it takes a lot of shots at taboos on both the right and the left, I think. Things that you're not supposed to talk about. And when I was writing it, I said, this is going to piss people off. This is going to piss people off. But when I'm writing, I just throw that out of my mind because I feel like it kills the art, And we're talking about other people policing you, and that's one problem. But I think the deeper problem is we've gotten into this frame of mind where we police our own work, and I think that's just disastrous. It's anathema to creativity.
Right.
So as I was writing,
it stifles it.
Yeah. I said I can't worry about if this pisses people off. I can't worry about if it ostracizes people. I just have to be true to the art and the characters and the story, and I have to write this the way that it's supposed to be written.
Could you imagine if Jack Ketchum was worried about when he wrote The Girl Next Door, about how people would react to that book? Could you imagine
if The Girl Next Door came out today from a new author, that was their first book?
It wouldn't. It would. First off, a lot of the gatekeepers, and I'm using this term not for traditional publishers, but even for like indie publishers. I know who they are. I'm not saying names or anything like that, but you see it with submission calls where they're like, no no children, no sexual violence, no dogs dying. You know, they have all these restrictions. Like, okay, that takes out.
It's all like cut and pasted from like one publisher to another.
Right.
Like,
So based on those guidelines, Stephen King's It wouldn't be published. Cemetery, Pet Cemetery wouldn't be published. No, you know, it's like
there's this thing that's, you know, I let me preface this by saying that I think that there's a ton of fine horror coming out right now. I think there's a ton of great horror coming out, but there is this undercurrent to try to push to make horror less dangerous and less transgressive and safer all around. And I don't like it. I don't like
that either. I stand opposed to that as much as I can. Nicely. I'll have a nice tone. You know, I've never had a debate about that though on this podcast. I mean, it would be something I would entertain, but I don't.
And I think of it kind of like.
Go ahead. I was gonna say with my temperament, I don't know. I don't know how long that conversation will last.
Has no balls anymore. Like, you know, Rock has no balls. It's the same kind of thing, you know. And like I said, there's a lot of fine horror books that even came out like in the past year. A lot of great ones, but there's a lot of stuff where people are just they're afraid to do anything that's, you know, that brings up a taboo or breaks a taboo or gets too edgy. And man, horror's supposed to push boundaries. It's supposed to make people uncomfortable. So,
and then I haven't checked out Black Pantheons, but now I really want to. Not because you're a white guy writing it, but because of the subject matter. I don't care if it came from a white guy or whatever. I like that story. Sounds pretty good. And I would imagine the amount of research you did for Black Hearts, if I were to ask you, like I'm going to ask you now, what sort of research did you do with Black Pantheons?
Well, yeah, Black Pantheons, it's all short stories.
Oh,
you know,
wait,
so
there was a particular story in that. That's right.
Yeah, it was a particular story, yeah. But Black Pantheons, you know, I research everything pretty thoroughly. In Black Pantheons, I tried to explore kind of cosmic horror ideas, but I didn't want to do like a straight Lovecraftian pastiche. So I tried to explore it through different mythologies. So, you know, there's one with, you know, Oni, like Japanese demons. There's one that is kind of a side story from my novel, The Devoured, which uses Norse and Native American mythology. There's some satanic stuff and Kabbalistic stuff. So, you know, I did a lot of research into these different traditions when I was doing that. But the research part I really enjoy when I'm writing. So I know some people don't.
Yeah, and even the story about the the Japanese kid in the internment in the internment camp. I'm sure you did a lot of research on that as well.
Yeah, you know, and it's I'm not saying everybody has to go this deep, but finding out like what the buildings they had to live in, what they were made out of, like what, you know, there were these tin structures with tar paper roofs, and looking at pictures of the internment camp and what the horizon looks like, things like that. Because I think the details can be important too, you know, when you're describing something. So, I think if you're going to write about anything, you know, you want to research it and treat it with respect. Honestly,
right? Otherwise people will call you out. You write a military thriller without spending time in the military, those guys will call you out real fast. They will. And, you know,
that's one of the reasons I try to stay away from military stuff. And, you know, I have to double check anything. Anytime I write anything with guns, I have to check it like 5 times because I don't know anything about it.
Is this a magazine or is it a clip? What is it?
Yeah, I every time I write, I have to check about like magazine and clip. Like every time I write something with a gun, because I can't remember.
Oh.
And I don't know military procedure. And actually, a book that I'm working on right now, I've been dragging my ass on it because I'm like, the military really has to get involved, but I hate writing about the military because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, you keep that part kind of vague. Like, I'm just going to have them deployed.
Yeah. So, but then, you know, I like researching about history. I like researching about art. I like researching about occultism. So I try to stay in those wheelhouses a little bit if it's something research heavy.
That's cool. See, okay, and like you said, not like every author or every writer has to go to that level of detail, but it definitely helps. I think that's what's really important, not just having the shared race or particular culture, because I said this before. This might be a problematic statement, but experience isn't exclusive to race. It's not exclusive to culture. Like, you can learn about other people's. You can learn about other people's life and get a knowledge about it by talking to them, by socializing.
Yes.
Like...
Absolutely.
Watch.
And
the way I worded that was probably wrong. They come after you for anything. Neil Gaiman was in trouble not too long ago, I think early in May, for just giving a compliment saying a work is Lovecraftian. Be like, oh, but that's... What did he say? He said... I don't remember all the details of that, but I just remember him using that phrase, Lovecraftian. He was complimenting, I think, a person of color's work, and they're like, that's problematic because he's racist. It's like, yeah, Lovecraft was racist. You're right, but that's not what it's about.
It's not. And if you're drawing upon his work, you probably know you're drawing upon his work.
Yeah.
And like, that's just something that you either draw upon his work, or you appreciate his work, or you don't. And you can't change what he was.
Right.
What's done is done. And if you don't want to draw upon his work because of that, that's fine.
Yeah.
If you don't feel comfortable writing something Lovecraftian, or even there's a lot of people who hate Lovecraft personally, and they like what he did, they like his art,
yeah.
and they almost do like an FU to him by trying to like co-opt his art, and even that, like, whatever, it's all
that's fine.
Like,
that's fine.
Yeah,
too.
it's fine. But you can't say that it's not, that his influence isn't there.
Right.
So.
And people do, like, there's authors of color that spin in a different way. That's fine if they want to do that. I have no problem with it. Go ahead.
Victor Lavelle wrote the Ballad of Black Tom, which was a retelling of Horror and Red Hook. It's an excellent book.
I haven't read that. I gotta check that one out. I have a growing list of stuff I need to read. Also a growing list of things I need to watch. The problem with it just keeps growing. Yeah. I don't really have the time. Hell, I barely made it through your book, and it's like there's so many other things that come up, and it's okay. I don't want to read, and then something else comes up.
It's endless. The ever-growing TBR pile.
Yeah.
But going back to the policing thing, though, I did get a little bit. I self-published Blackheart Boys Choir, but I did submit it to a few publishers, and this isn't really policing, but I sent it to several publishers, and first I sent it to ST Joshi because I had kind of cultivated a little bit of a relationship with him beforehand. I had sent him Black Pantheons, and he's like, "This is good, but it's not quite good enough. Like, keep writing and sending me stuff." So I sent him Blackheart Boys Choir, and he's like, "This is excellent. This is, So he put me in touch with a couple publishers, and the response from most of them was the same thing. They're like, "This is an excellent book. It addresses important topics. The characterization is great, and I can't sell it." And it was interesting because I got probably like 4 or 5 like that. They're like, this is great, and it's completely unmarketable. So
you had to self-publish it though, because I
self-published, and I did. I had sent it to someone who I kind of knew, who they have like a degree in psychology and such, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't addressing mental issues in a demeaning way. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't approaching Lucian's possible insanity in a way that was, I guess, dismissive of people with mental illness. And he said I wasn't, and that it was on, but he also said, he's like, "This is too dangerous a book to publish. You shouldn't put this out."
Hey, that would push me to push it out. I'd be like, "Oh, okay."
Man, that was like that was. I wanted to put that on the back of the book.
Damn, that's fucking metal.
Yeah.
Shit, that's.
And then.
Okay.
I had a few reviews. Like there was one podcast who reviewed it, and they really didn't. Most of them didn't like it, and they kind of tore into it like in depth, and for all the reasons that I kind of figured people wouldn't like it. So I wouldn't say anybody policed me trying to like keep me from getting it out, but no one was going to help me get it out. Once again, with the exception of St. Joshi, who was incredibly generous to me with his time and his advice. So
I mean, how was that? So you had to self-publish this one. I mean, how was that experience? Did it have the same? Well, I mean, were you able to put it out there?
I've self-published most of my stuff.
Okay.
My first book was not self-published. It came out through Winlock Press, which was an imprint of Permuted Press, and that experience wasn't great. And then I self-published my next several books, and I looked for a publisher for Blackheart Boys Choir because I felt like it was a more important book. I wanted it to have a bigger audience. That didn't pan out, so I just did it myself. And going back to my music days and my comic days, I've always been a DIY guy, so it wasn't a big deal. And I did make it onto the preliminary ballot for the Bram Stoker Awards with Boys Choir. So for a self-published book, a little self-published book, that's pretty good. And it's sold pretty well within the first couple months that it came out, and it's gotten mostly a really good reaction. So I wish it could have had a bigger reach. I hope it still does get a bigger reach. But ultimately, I was able to put out the book I wanted the way that I wanted. So I'm happy with that. It's preferable to diluting it, Well,
that's better than having to cuck to someone, to use that phrase. But to have to change it, to have to edit it, to have to water it down, make it PG-13, whatever. It's like, I mean, have the sales been bad? I mean, in this way, you cut out the middleman. So when it does sell, like you get all the Amazon gets a cut or whatever, whoever you use.
Yeah,
but
no, it's honestly it was the best pre-order I had done at that point, by far. Like I think the pre-orders I did like 10 times as many pre-orders as my previous book, and I even after that, I was on the Lovecraft Ezine podcast right after it came out, and that helped a lot. And
those guys are pretty cool.
Yeah, and having the forward by St. Joshi and St. Joshi support for the book, that helped. So it did well. It just, I think it's one of these things where you're putting out indie horror. You never reaching the numbers you really want to reach. So, but I can't complain. It's gotten good reviews, and it's sold a lot more than most indie books do.
When I was reading this book, it seems like it really needs to be in a manga form.
Like, it's funny. I've been thinking about adapting it into a comic format.
Man, I mean, I guess go back to the comics a little bit, just for a little bit. How hard is it to self-publish like a black and white manga style? Like, could you do that? Could you do that through, I don't know, KDP
I can totally do it. And I wouldn't use KDP, but I could do it very easily. It's just a matter of the money.
Yeah.
But self-publishing in comics, that self-publishing in comics has a much different history than with regular books. It's almost like
I've noticed it leaves me kind of confused. Like what?
Because like self-publishing in comics is a badge of honor. Like that's how you came up in comics. Like Ninja Turtles was self-published, and like all these guys like Brian Michael Bendis, who was like the head writer at Marvel and then got poached by DC in the past couple of years. He came up as a self-published guy, and like that's how you made a name for yourself and how you earned respect in the comics community. But then, so there were ways to do this. There were companies that printed, this stuff, on-demand printing, I think before Amazon was doing it. And so it was very accessible. Not so much digital in the early days, but, now there's Comixology and there's drive-through comics and all this other stuff. So it's very easy to do. It's just once again, comics are expensive. So if I was going to do it, I'd have to have some sort of feasible financial plan behind it, whether it was a Kickstarter or whatever.
Okay.
But I've been told that my writing style is very visual, and I think it goes back to working in comics for so long. So the idea of doing it as a comic is appealing to me, even if just so I can reach kind of a whole other audience that maybe doesn't read traditional books, you know?
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
That's the thing with books, and I face this reality too. I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer, but it's like less people read, and that number is kind of growing. I know
Absolutely.
a lot more people have a Kindle more than ever, but they're not really reading on the Kindle. I don't know what they're doing with it.
They don't use it. They buy it. Oh, I'm going to read more, and then they don't. And more books come out every year, so there's less readers and more books every year.
Right.
And then I do have there's a screenwriter friend of mine that is, going through the book and taking some notes, and he'd like to produce a screenplay of it. So that's, I imagine that's a much longer process, but that's something that is kind of on the side that maybe someday could be a reality.
But I have Blackheart Boys Choir on the screen for the podcast part of it here. If you're listening to this on the podcast feed, I apologize, but I just bring it up just to show the ranking, the feedback here. It's not bad. A 4.6 out of 5 with 18 reviews. Not a bad reaction.
I think it's got 40 reviews on Goodreads.
On Goodreads?
So,
hey, that's nice.
Yeah. Which doesn't give as much clout, I guess, as Amazon, but still cool to see.
Doesn't Amazon own Goodreads now? Anyway?
They do. Yeah.
So why don't they just... Okay.
I think, I don't know.
That's always a step. If the company owns
algorithms.
all of it, if the company owns both, it's like, well, how do we combine them together so we don't have, I don't know, one day maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I know we talked about content policing a little bit. Yeah, I guess to touch on that just a little bit more, because I've had experience too. Deadman's Tome put out, we always put out like a Christmas themed anthology every year, and I think last year we did one called Psycho Holiday. Yeah, It was last year, and that was I had some problems with the title. Someone wanted to take down the submission call from Horror Tree because of the word psycho, because that was demeaning to people with mental disabilities or something. And I don't know, maybe it's because of my personality or whatever. I could be a really nice guy. I can be a really nice guy to people I don't like, people I disagree with, whatever. But if you come at me with some nonsense like that, I'm thinking, okay, wait. Like, I don't mean psycho in some demeaning way. I mean psycho like, these motherfuckers are fucking...
Yeah.
They're crazy. They're like, oh, no. I don't mean like they're mentally ill. I mean they're fucking full-on deranged. I mean, you wouldn't leave, I just laughed it off. But, nothing really came from it. Or came of it.
And to be fair, like psychopathy is like a very specific mental disorder too, and it describes people who you would call psychos. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whether it's in a traditional, like I guess, whether it's in a more kind of exciting story case, like a Patrick Bateman kind of guy or something like that, or even kind of a CEO with no empathy. So you're not
like American Psycho. Like American Psycho.
You're not going after somebody who has general mental illness. Anyways, you know. So, anyways,
it wasn't bipolar holiday. It wasn't like manic depression holiday. It was Psycho Holiday. And besides, you're a metal guy. I think you get the reference right away. What I was talking about. I was listening to Pantera when it was like Psycho Holiday. That's easy. That's an easy title.
But like I said, the content policing. I think the biggest problem from it is that people start policing their own work, because because ultimately we live in a time now where, there's a bunch of small presses, and if you can get in with them, if you want to get in with them, that's one avenue. You could still try to do like more high-end traditional publishing with like the big New York publishers and get an agent and all that. But like if none of that else works, you can self-publish and you can make a lot of money still, depending on how much work you're willing to put in and how good your product is. And no one can stop you. Literally, no one can stop you except for yourself. If you get that into your head that oh, this isn't allowed, so I'm not going to do this thing. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I've made way more money off my self-published work than I have from anything I've traditionally.
Yeah, that
published.
was the next question. That was the next thing, because that always comes up with the writing forums. Oh, which one's better? I'm like, well, which way are you gonna make more money? I mean,
yeah.
So you definitely made more money self-publishing.
Oh, way more money. Like both in comics and in prose, hands down, and. Just my back catalog is getting respectable at this point, and I have stuff on Audible, and they've kind of changed some things recently on Audible, but historically Audible's been like free money. It's incredible. And the first 3 months, because Amazon pays a little bit like later, but January, February, March of 2020 have just been like. They were just like 3 record-breaking months for me, nice. Royalty-wise. And honestly, on like my bigger stuff, like my first novel that I did for that imprint of Permuted, I never saw any money from that. I have a graphic novel. Are they still
around? I haven't really.
Permuted's around, okay. But I
think they have some controversy or something.
They had a lot of Yeah, they did a lot of stuff with where they took writers' books out of print. They only had them up as ebook after they had been contractually obligated to put them into print and other formats and stuff. And you had to pay to get your rights back.
I think I heard about that from Brian Keene. I used to listen to his podcast quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know a lot of people jumped on it. I'm sure Keene did.
I know Chizine had some problems too, and all that stuff.
That was a different thing. I guess they just weren't paying people. And I had heard about that probably 2 years before it broke. People just complaining about it. Yeah. Like when I was at writing events. So that was kind of a known, like a whispered secret years before it came out.
That's usually how it works, right?
Yeah. So, and I think it was Ed Kurtz who finally was sick of it, and he was like, "I want my damn money," So, like I said, I didn't get any money for that. I have a graphic novel called Mystima that came out from Arcana Studios. They never paid me for that. I've gotten paid money for the anthologies I've done, and some decent money for the anthologies I've done, which is funny because they're just short stories. But yeah, my self-published work is much, much more money than anything I've done with traditional publishers. To be fair, I have a collection coming out, I don't know when, from Weird House Press, and that's run by Joe Morey, who he was the founder.
Is that the other cover that you sent me, or that's the novella?
No, that's the novella. No, this doesn't have a cover or anything yet. And it was supposed to come out this year, but I don't think it's going to come out this year because of all the COVID-19 stuff. And it's called Devil's Night, and it's all stories about like Devil's Night in Detroit.
Hey, that's nice.
Yeah, so and that's coming out from Weird House Press, and Weird House Press has been very good to work with. And they said, we're going to pay you this advance. They paid me this advance, So I'm not shitting on.
Hey, they give you advance. Hey, that's nice.
Yeah. So I'm definitely not shitting on small press as a whole. Yeah. I'm just saying, in my experience, I've made more money.
Hey, I would take offense if you did. I'd be like, what? I pay people.
Yeah, So, and I think
you're good.
There's an agility to self-publishing too, where you don't always have. I guess the bigger the publisher you're dealing with, kind of the less agility you have to market or to do. To put stuff on sale in a timely manner. When you're doing it yourself, you can kind of respond very quickly. which is advantageous.
You have pretty much full control. I mean, you do. What you can't control is what, I guess, Amazon's response or whoever you use.
Yep.
I mean, there is a problem that you might run into where Amazon will say your book violates content guidelines, but usually I found ways to navigate that where I can get. I had a short story collection a long time ago called No Safe Word. It was erotica and horror. And I'm a guy. I was looking at erotica from the. I think there was a term I used in that book that was problematic for Amazon. It was rape fantasy. I think it was that. And because I put it in the erotic section, I think that term triggered it. So I'm like, because it didn't change until I took that out. But me being, hard-headed and stubborn and like, because when they tell you it violated one of their guidelines, they don't tell you what it is. I was like,
that's a secret. The same thing happened to I think you had Death's Head Press on here.
Oh
before,
yeah,
right?
it happened to them. I think they had erotic.
It happened to them with their horror erotic thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was called Rope Burns originally, and then they had to change the title.
So you can't have anything that alludes to hints at like rape stuff. But I'm like, wait a second. And the reason I came up with the title, or I use that term, is because I was thinking about one of my exes. She was, had rape fantasies, whatever, and she would read erotica, and she'd be like, rape fantasy stuff. It's like, okay. Like, you guys are into that stuff? You ladies are into that stuff? And it's like, you read the erotica, and it's like, it's it borderlines on that, Mm-hmm. So, hey, some of the old school stuff, it goes into that,
Yes.
all the way. So I just called it what it was, and that was a bad thing. So
it's completely legitimate. Like I've known a lot of women with who are into that. So I mean I think it's a very legitimate thing for like an erotic section. In an erotic book. I don't see why they would jump on that,
right?
Because it is. I mean, that's a thing that people are into.
It is. I mean, Amazon will have scat fetishes. They'll have borderline bestiality fetishes with the, I guess, werewolves and stuff.
I think at least on the crypto stuff, I think they started cracking down on that. I heard, like the Bigfoot stuff.
Okay,
because I was like, man, I should just like crank that stuff out and make money because these guys are just pulling in cash.
Like the dinosaur stuff too.
Yeah,
that stuff is crazy. Like the philosopher got boned by the T-Rex or something. Those books.
People are buying it.
I would buy it just to read it live. I did once. It's crazy stuff. I was like, wow. Anyway, I definitely want to talk about your other book. I know we're going to overtime mode. Those who go forth into the empty place of gods.
Yes.
All right. What's going on with this book? Now, this one I haven't read.
So, this one's kind of it's kind of weird. It's a cosmic horror book, but not in a typical way, and it doesn't feel like Blackheart Boys Choir at all. It definitely goes more back to kind of my comic book roots, I would say. And I co-wrote it with Doug Rinaldi, who is another writer from Massachusetts. And Doug and I actually knew each other from back in the late 90s, early 2000s metal scene here. He was in a band called Bane of Existence, and my band played. Yeah, we played together a bunch of times, and then we lost touch kind of after we both stopped playing music, and we reconnected in the New England horror scene. And so anyways, we wrote this book together, and it's about this dude, Brewster Gilligan, and he's kind of a genius underachiever. He's got a ton of knowledge, and he's really smart, and he's got a Mensa card in his wallet, and but he has no practical skills. And he's broke, and nobody likes him because he's kind of a know-it-all, like smart ass, and he doesn't have a girlfriend, and he all he has is the fact that, like, if he's watching some quiz show, he knows the answer. So he ends up on this quiz show that this is like his life goal, and he gets some question and he knows the answer. He says it, and the answer to this question is the order of the 9 lunar mansions. And this phrase kind of awakens these immortal, like, guardians around the world. There are 9 of them, and they all guard kind of a different aspect of reality or some such thing like that. And no one's supposed to know that they exist or what they guard exists. So when he says this, it awakens them kind of, and they all come rushing after him. And as you go on in the book, you find out that this whole thing has kind of been orchestrated by someone else, and he's being used as a tool. And along the way, he runs into his back from the dead, kind of reanimated grandfather, his reanimated uncle. And it just gets kind of wacky. So there's a lot of occultism, a lot of supernatural.
Cool. I like that. I mean, it happened because of a game show. He listed the stuff because of a game show.
Yeah. So
that's funny. I like that.
And it's very over the top. There's a lot of very creative use of kind of supernatural elements in it, I think, and it's very violent and kind of it's kind of funny. There's definitely some intentional humor in there, and people, it's gotten mixed reviews. Some people really dig it. Some people think it's funny. Other people are expecting, I think, something more literary from it because of the title and the cover. And it's definitely not literary cosmic horror. It's more comic book cosmic horror, I would say. Okay. And I think one review described it as wizard fights or something like
wizard
that.
Fights.
But it's funny, and it's fast paced, and it's short. It's under 100 pages.
Oh, hey, I could probably get through that. Maybe. I feel kind of embarrassed I didn't get through your book yet. Man.
Oh, I understand completely. I'm a slow reader.
Something from John Everson too, one of his books, at the same time, while doing some housework, doing some home improvement at the same time. I don't have time for much. But no, this sounds great. This sounds like something I'll definitely enjoy. And wizard fights. What's wrong with that? Isn't that what Harry Potter is? Wizard fights.
Yeah, it's definitely. It's got shades of Clive Barker in there. It's got shades of John Dies at the end, but it was a fun book to write, and it was cool collaborating with someone else. I hadn't done that in prose before, and it went pretty smoother than I thought it would. And Doug's a really talented writer in his own right, and the whole thing was, he came up with the concept, and I helped him flesh it out, and then we just kind of traded chapters. I made an outline, and he was like, "Oh, I'll write this part," and we kind of called dibs on the different scenes.
So that's how y'all did that. There's always that question with when you write with 2 authors. How do y'all share? Like, are y'all clash of egos, or like what happens?
Yeah, I don't think there wasn't much of an ego thing with. I don't think Doug or I are big enough to really have too big of egos. I think, I have more stuff published than Doug, and I think I'm probably a little bit more well known than Doug is, but I'm not like a name or anything.
Right.
And we've known each other for a long time.
You even said that in a humble way. So, yeah. Look at that.
So, but Doug's a very talented writer, and he's easy to work with. I think the only time there was any sort of issue, I can remember, there was a part towards the end, and Doug he was having trouble writing it, and he said, "Why don't you take a crack at it?" And what you had written was fine, but it wasn't the way that I would write it or could write it. So I had to cut a lot of it to be able to write it myself, just because of how I write. And I think that was the only time there was any kind of, I don't even want to say clash, but any sort of tension at all. It was just on that little thing. And what I was most happy about with that book is everyone has said they can't tell who's writing what. It sounds cohesive, and that was my biggest concern, was that it was going to be like, yeah. So, yeah, I'm very happy with how it came out, and I really love the cover. That was done by, oh my God, I'm blanking, Revere. Why can't I remember his first name?
What's his last name? Anyways, what's his last
Revere.
name? Revere. Okay.
But it's spelled revert.
Refer.
I actually had to find out the pronunciation for the audiobook. So anyways, but he's done a lot of great cover work, and that book was originally supposed to come out through Gehenna and Hinnom Press, but they had some problems. But they did let us keep the cover,
and that's
very kind of them. Yeah.
Wait. I mean, did they pay for the cover for you guys?
Oh yeah, they paid for the cover because they were supposed to put out the book.
Well, that's generous.
But they ran into problems, and Charles said, I can't do anything with this cover. Why don't you guys have it? So,
man,
it was very nice of him.
Man, that speaks volumes about the character. I mean, are they still around?
I don't know what's going on. They ran a big Kickstarter back in 2018 and then kind of vanished. So I don't know what their status is.
That happens. That happens a lot. We come and go,
Yeah.
Or we slow down. We pick up. I don't know. Like, there was a magazine that came out, I think, years ago called Deadlights. It looked very promising. It had
I remember that
one issue, and then a second issue, but then it just vanished.
Yeah, and like you said, with that first issue, it looked very promising. And like Gehenna and Hinnom, they had a Hinnom magazine, which went, they did a lot of issues, like a fair amount of issues, and it was an excellent magazine. So, I don't know what the future holds for them or what's going to happen with the books they had signed, but I do wish Charles the best, and I hope the company recovers, and they were putting out some cool stuff.
Now, I always ask this question for all my guests: what is your favorite horror movie and why?
My favorite horror movie would be A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. And I imagine part of it's nostalgia, but it's really, I guess the core of it to me is, I think Nancy Thompson is just like a killer protagonist, because she fights back. She's not just running. In that whole thing towards the end where she gets like the survivalist manual and she's setting up the booby traps, and even when like her mother's telling her, oh, you just need sleep and you're going crazy, and
is she the one that realizes that you can like take like caffeine and stuff to like stay awake?
Well, that happens in like almost all the movies, but yeah, she's like drinking coffee nonstop and everything, and she ends up pulling out his hat from the dream and then realizing she can pull him out from the dream. And also just the imagery in it was so strange and scary. And I think it holds up to this day.
It does. It does.
There's one particular scene towards the beginning of the film where Freddy's walking down this kind of like street or alleyway, and his arms are all stretched out. And, it's like these practical effects. And, it's just probably like sticks in a long sweater or something. But it just looks so weird and creepy, and it creeps me out to this day. And out of all those films, one was the only one where he really cracking jokes the whole time, and you barely his face is always kind of shadowed. And he was scary in that film in a way that he wasn't scary in any of the others. So that stands out for me. The other one, though, going back, man, John Carpenter's Christine, I wrote a whole love letter to that movie on my blog at one point. And that was just on a lot of levels. That's just a very important movie to me. As a kid who didn't.
Not to cut you off, I just want to add to that about what you're about to say. I've been doing this podcast for many years now, and I think this is the first time the movie Christine comes up.
Really?
Yeah. So have at
Oh
it.
man,
Have at it.
it was a very important film for me. And you know, when I was a younger kid, like probably before when I hit 12, I kind of discovered metal, and I was like, I'm going to become this person, and I kind of moved in this direction of, self-becoming of what, I'm going to be this guy. But before then, I was just like really nerdy, and I got picked on really badly and bullied, and I had a lot of anger and a lot of resentment, and I had a lot of, even at a young age, I had violent fantasies. And Christine was, it was kind of this outlet for my feelings toward these bullies and these people who I didn't get along with. But aside from him just getting revenge on these people, Christine, I think this is more so in the book, in the movie. You don't really see it as much in the book. I think the book has a different feel to it. But in the movie, the car loves him. Mm-hmm. And the car's the only thing in the world that really, that gives back to him the way that he gives to it. And I guess
I wish I was the way with my car.
As a kind of a troubled little kid, that was something I was really yearning for. And that was, I guess, my first concept of romance really was the relationship between Arnie and Christine. And it was just something I that kind of connection I yearned for. And that coupled with the violence and the revenge and the resentment, it just spoke to me a lot when I was a kid. And the aesthetic of it too, man. Like I love old cars. Mm-hmm. I've never owned a nice old car because I'm too practical for that. But I love, old cars with the fins and the really nice bodies like that.
Yeah.
And I like a lot about the 50s, like lot of 50s.
If you could have any of those old cars, which one would it be?
I mean, and it's probably going back to Christine, but I'd probably go with like an old Plymouth Fury. I love that build. I love that aesthetic. And there's something about probably not the real 1950s, but the idealized version of the 1950s and that whole aesthetic, which is very appealing to me. And then the scene where like the car's on fire going down the street, and John Carpenter's score, man. John Carpenter, he's a great musician too.
Oh, he is.
So yeah, just everything about that film, man, was like, I always say Nightmare on Elm Street's my favorite, but I think when I really think about it, Christine probably is.
I like that pick. That's good. Yeah. I agree. That movie's pretty damn good.
Yeah. I'm afraid they're going to remake it and ruin it.
Of course they will. I only ask if they choose a female lead, which they will. That it'd be someone like Megan Fox. Maybe not her, but someone kind of in that vein of hotness. Because just don't have it be a 300-pound, blue-haired, ultra-feminist who's going to be like, patriarchy. You don't need that. Just keep it simple. I hate it when they they put like bullcrap in there. It's like
my big problem with stuff like that is I feel like if you're gonna have a message I feel like it's fine to have a message in fiction, more so in original fiction than in remakes. But
remakes, it's like you're taking what someone else did and you're using that as your I guess your platform. It's like, great, thank you.
But I think that if you're gonna do it, it should be natural and it should be in service to the story. There should be a symbiosis between the story and the message that is natural and organic. And I think that too many works of fiction, people come at it saying, I have this message that I want to put out there, and I have this agenda, and I'm going to build a narrative around that, and it feels forced, and it feels clunky and heavy-handed, and that's my big problem with it. I think that you can have very good socio-political fiction, whether it's movies or books or whatever, if you're doing it in service of the story or in symbiosis with the story, like I said. But there's so much out there where it's just like, this is my message. Do you understand it? Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it?
And it's like they do it like we're kids. It's like it's obvious. You put the message on your
propaganda
sleeve.
At that point.
Yeah,
it's propaganda instead of art.
And I laugh at it. I roll my eyes at it when it comes from the right. Same way when it comes from the left. It's like, guys,
I don't care whose side it's coming from. It's if you're going to hit me with some heavy-handed message, then, and you know, I hadn't really thought about this here. Okay, now I'm going to get everybody like hating me. I was listening to Jordan Peterson talk about art, and he was talking about how I think they had asked him about his favorite female authors or something, and they thought he was going to say Ayn Rand because she has these very kind of libertarian ideas, and he mentioned how he doesn't care for Ayn Rand because Ayn Rand's work comes at everything with the politics first, the message first, in that it's in service of the message rather than in service of the art, and that's propaganda. And that statement really resonated with me.
Yeah.
I like some of Ayn Rand's stuff. I really like Anthem was a huge book for me about the idea of individuality and individualism. But like I think like Atlas Shrugged is very clunky. I think it's I've like I said, I don't want to get too into politics. Ayn Rand wrote another book called it was a nonfiction book about her philosophy, and I think that it's a much better way to convey her thoughts than a big piece of fiction. And this that's on the right, and you see it. I guess you see it less on the right because there's less fiction written from right-wing people. But whether it's coming from the right or the left, it's annoying when we're being treated like children about it.
Well, they definitely produce a lot of movies, but usually those movies don't really go too far. And when they do, didn't they have one about abortion that they were trying to say it was trying to be censored? I don't remember.
Well, I have no clue.
I have no clue either. But I'm just like they produce that stuff. The left hijacks franchises. They've produced that stuff. That I think that's the big problem there. It's like, look, man, when people just want to watch. If you're gonna reboot something, just reboot it. Just keep what made the movie good, and just do that again. It's not hard.
Well, so here's the thing. If you take the Ghostbusters reboot, and my problem, I thought it was a fine. If it was not Ghostbusters,
if it wasn't Ghostbusters, it was like Bridesmaids.
It was entertaining. It was a good popcorn movie. My kid really enjoyed it. There was nothing wrong with it if it wasn't Ghostbusters. But the problem with it is that Ghostbusters had some of the best comedic minds of the time. It wasn't just like kind of a comedy horror movie or whatever. It was Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. You had like these incredible comedians, and then when you make the reboot, I don't care that it's women. I don't care that it's different. Yeah. I care that the talent they picked was not up to the task. Those actresses were not on the same level as the people who created the original Ghostbusters.
You were very generous, and that's fine. That's fine. If it wasn't Ghostbusters, it would be I guess an okay popcorn flick.
Yeah, it would have been an enjoyable, forgettable popcorn movie. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but I wouldn't have regretted going to see it.
They kind of had the same sort of comedy that would be in I guess similar to like Bridesmaids in a way. I mean, they had the same crew, and they had the queef jokes and all that stuff. If you want to have that. Like, that's not. I mean,
you're taking on. You're trying to fill huge shoes, and you didn't have the script to do it. You didn't have the talent to do it. And that I think that's a big problem with these reboots. They thought that they could be like, oh, we're going to make Ghostbusters, and and once again, I don't care that it was with women. I care that that the product was inferior. But, and once again, I don't even care that the product was inferior because I can just go watch the original Ghostbusters. I don't like Ghostbusters 2 kind of sucked too. Like, so like I can just go back to the original Ghostbusters.
It's been a while since I watched the second one, but there's scenes in the second one that are funny. There
are scenes that are funny, yeah. But like I said, so I don't.
Oh shit! The painting guy. What the fuck was his name?
Vigo the Carpathian.
Dude,
Vigo was cool.
When he comes out, full out, it was fucking scary.
Yeah. Vigo was cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just keep thinking of like the end with the the NES Advantage controller and the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, that was wild. That was wild. But
there's a commercial for that controller.
Yeah.
But like I said, so I don't even care. Like, it doesn't bother me that movie exists, but I just think that I think that they marketed it to. They say that all these guys are upset that there's a female Ghostbusters movie, and I don't think
wasn't even it. Like, we don't.
That was part of it. I think that some people were upset because of that, but the marketing was very much made to be like, look, this is like a big like feminist female Ghostbusters movie, and that's not what it was. It was a goofy comedy that wasn't up to the task to living up to the original, and there was no feminist agenda to it. It wasn't a political movie. It was just they tried to ride on that, on that political tide, and
the marketing definitely didn't help. When you market it like it's some big thing like that, it's like, guys, can you just market the movie and not market like a message you think the movie has or something? I mean,
and it was so artificial because I don't think that they were trying to market that message because they thought that message was marketable, and then it blew up. So, but
that happens. That happens. It happened with a lot of different products too around that same time. It was outrage. They can get you outraged by stuff on purpose because they know it'll draw a crowd.
Oh yeah, it's to get attention and to get clicks and to sell tickets, and it doesn't always work. So, but like I said, I can go back and watch the original Ghostbusters, and like if this movie resonates with some younger people, and there's some young women who can identify with it, and it kind of inspires them to explore more stuff like this. That's great. That's a great effect of it. It's just, in my opinion, if you're gonna try to go after something that iconic, you need to do a better job.
Right.
So,
and they're probably it might be long forgotten after they're rebooting it again with the kid from Stranger Things.
Yeah, as I say, it just looks like a Stranger Things movie.
But I don't know. I think it might be alright. I don't know. We'll see what happens with that one. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
But man, guys, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Press the like button, share, subscribe. Even though this YouTube channel, in a way, is kind of, I don't want to say dead to me. It's like there's no real incentive. I'm demonetized because the show's too sexy. That's the truth of it. It was demonetized because the bulk of the content is sexualized. I'm the bulk of the content. But anyway, but yeah, share, like, subscribe. You're listening to this on the podcast. Share. Share it. Curtis, Lawson, thank you so much for coming on to talk.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let me go ahead and wrap up the stream here.